So most leaders think that scaling or growing quickly is about selling faster or hiring a lot of people more quickly. And it's not really. Because if you build quickly or build big on something that's fragile, you'll just break it that much quicker. In this video, I want to talk about the 6 things that you need to do to scale well, to scale sustainably so you don't have a high watermark year and then collapse back down. And then the 3 things that you need to avoid that will kill momentum. So here's the first of the 6 things that you need to do, and that's to put the right people on the right seats on the bus. That's a quote from Jim Collins. But really, it's important because scaling companies, particularly if they're starting small, tend to have teams of people that are really whoever they could persuade to come work for them while they were starting up, while things were rough, while maybe people weren't getting paid great. And you've got a team now that help get you to where you're at, and they're often loyal and you feel a loyalty to them. But are they the kind of people who can carry a complex, faster moving organization? And that's the real question that you need to ask. Many companies that attempt to scale find themselves stuck because they have people in the wrong seats. They have people that are good at one thing, but they're not good at another. But in small companies or smaller companies, often you're wearing 3, 4, 5, 15 different hats, and we're not really sure who's good at what, because we're just happy at the beginning to be good at anything or to be able to get anything done. But as you grow, growth on its own requires a higher level of capacity on your team, and that people will just naturally become more specialized in certain roles. And you won't have somebody that's doing your bookkeeping, as well as managing your front office, as well as answering your phones, as well as ordering all of the product that you need, et cetera, et cetera. You start to separate those tasks out. And as they become separated and as you grow, they become more complex. And so you start to need people who not just function as good employees or good helpers, but actually function as operators. And there's broadly speaking, 2 buckets of people that are really important to pay attention to as you start to grow. The first is your management or leadership team. You have to have people in place who can really lead an increasingly complex organization. If you don't have them in place, then you're going to find yourself getting stuck around their capacity or even their confidence levels. The second thing that you need to have in place are people who are technically proficient. So whatever kind of business you're in, maybe you're in engineering, maybe you're in construction, maybe you're in the health field, maybe you're in tech, you're going to have people that are technically proficient or technically required to be proficient for their roles. And if you have people that are just kind of okay or are still developing their confidence, still developing their abilities, your company is going to get stuck. Your scaling is going to get stuck at their level of confidence, at their level of ability. And you don't want that. And so you're going to want to be able to build a team that is able to grow and take your company where it needs to grow or where it needs to go. Now, in this doesn't mean that everybody needs to be an A player on your team, so to speak. But in those key roles and key leadership and management functions, and in terms of your key technical needs of your company, you do need people that are high performers. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck. The second of the 6 things that you need is to scale your systems. You need to have a well-written, well-thought-through playbook so that people can run plays. They understand how to hire people. They understand how to onboard. They understand how do you do payroll? How do you do invoicing? How do you do shift changes? How do you communicate information from one department to the next, especially if you're handing over a client? How do you handle any of these routine things that you do regularly? Right in small companies, oftentimes this is all institutional knowledge. But I just was in a conversation the other day with a client that's in a very large organization, and they still have a high level of institutional knowledge that they're running things off of, and they really don't have it written down. And what they do have written down, they're not applying with discipline. They're not applying it consistently. And this creates a lot of confusion, and it creates disorganization, and it creates conflict, and it just slows everything down. It's a bottleneck. So what you want to do is take the time to create your plays, to create your systems, your processes, your procedures, your policies, all of those kinds of things that allow everybody to understand when we hire somebody, they all go through the same process. When we invoice, it's all done exactly the same way so that it's clear and you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel over and over and over again, or sometimes even worse, you have different departments or different people who invent their own kinds of wheels, their own special wheels, and they don't fit together well. They don't work together well, and it creates confusion for customers, and it creates confusion for employees. It's not good. It's not an effective process. It often happens because leaders don't want to feel bureaucratic. They don't want to feel corporate. They don't want to feel disciplinarian. They don't want to be any of those kinds of things. But what happens, it actually hurts people and confuses people because it creates chaos, it creates confusion. And so you serve your team well by creating clarity around expectations. And as an organization grows, you can't sit down and communicate how to do everything to everybody. You need to have the playbook written. The third thing that you want to do, and this is a little abstract in a way, but you want to operationalize your culture. Operationalize your culture. So this is related to what I said previously in terms of writing down your playbook, your processes and procedures and so on. But operationalizing your culture has to do with taking your values, and your values should inform the kinds of decisions that are acceptable, the kinds of decisions that you make, and the kinds of behaviors that are considered appropriate or expected within the organization. So for example, if customer service is a value of yours, nobody really knows what those two words mean, customer service. There's all kinds of customer service. There's all sorts of ways to deliver it and to receive it. What does it mean for your organization? You want to operationalize it in terms of what does this mean in terms of how you answer the phone, in terms of how you respond to emails, in terms of how long do you let messages sit before a response is expected? What does it mean in terms of handling customer complaints? Is there a process in place so that people understand that for us, customer service looks this way and everybody has the same understanding of what that means? This is super important as you scale because what you really want is consistency across the organization. This does a bunch of things. Two of the most important that it does is it makes management easier because everybody has the same understanding of what's expected. And so you're not trying to manage everybody individually and independently. You can manage teams, you can manage departments, you can manage locations, and everybody has the same understanding of how they should perform. The second thing is for customers coming in, they have the same expectations. They know that if they talk to whoever picks up the phone, they're going to get the same kind of response from them. That they can't play the game that I've played with organizations where if I don't get the answer I want from one person, I hang up, call back, and talk to whoever else that I'm going to get. And sometimes I get the response that I'm looking for from this other person. It really shouldn't be that way. It's convenient if you want to play the system, but that's not convenient for me as a customer because I don't know which of those two answers I got was really the policy or the appropriate response. Was the first person really upholding policy and the second person was allowing an exception? Those are not great scenarios if that happens for your company. And so you don't want customers to feel like that they have to figure you out or how to game you to get you to work well as a company. You want it to be consistent all the way across the board. And this applies to anything else. And any other value that you say that you have, you want to delineate for everyone, this is what this looks like in our organization. I was working with a car dealership that was really wanting to build a culture around its set of values. And one of the things that was really interesting is we defined what this would look like for the service department. We defined what it would look like for the sales department once people were already hired. We also defined what it would look like for the parts department, the three major components of most dealerships. What we didn't define is what these values would look like in the hiring process in terms of how did you recruit, how did you select, and how did you onboard or train new hires. And as a result, even though for all of the people that were kind of old timers there, they all adopted this new way of doing things, but we kept bringing in new people. that didn't have the same set of expectations. They weren't being enculturated at the beginning. Once we identified, and the reason for this is because when we developed the whole process, HR wasn't a management level function, and it was all managers that were involved in developing the process. HR was a lower level function within the organization that hadn't been represented, so we just overlooked it. When we saw that problem, we were able to go back and correct it because we were able to identify where the issue was. It was in their hiring, and we hadn't translated their values so that it tied into their hiring processes. And this is what I mean by operationalizing your culture. Once we did that, that problem disappeared. The fourth thing that you want to do to help scale, and this is something that you do to make your products or services easier for the customer to buy. And that's basically to productize your product or productize your service. So there's lots of ways to do that. As opposed to selling one t-shirt at a time, maybe you sell a 3-pack of t-shirts. Perhaps you've got a medical clinic may offer an employer care plan, which has maybe a suite of products or services that are tied into it. A construction company may have a bridge rehab program. The specific details of that may still be adjusted per client, per situation, but by creating what feels like a real thing, a tangible thing, customers find a way to connect to it better, and they're more prone to be interested in it because it feels like less for them to figure out. And so you want to think about what are the main products, the main services that you offer, and how do you productize them? How do you package them in a way where you can, or bundle them in a way, that's other language that gets used often, so that the customer or the client has a faster way of understanding what they could get or what they could receive from you. So for example, I have something called the Succession 360 Toolkit. It's a suite of products that I've created to help people through a succession planning process, to look at emergency successions, to think about staff successions, how to work with single owner companies, and how do they think about succession. There's all sorts of tools in the toolkit, and if I try to explain all of that to people straight out of the gate, they kind of get overwhelmed. But Succession 360 Toolkit sounds like something, and people will go take a look at it, and they do all the time. The fifth way that you scale is by expanding your channels or your markets that you sell through. Basically finding a new way of communicating what you offer to your existing customer base, or finding a new set of customers. Now, what I recommend in doing this is that you don't aim in all directions at once. This gets overwhelming. And so people make this mistake. Maybe they try to jump on every single social media channel all at once. And that's a mistake because each one has its own process, its own algorithm, its own way of operating. And each one has a better fit for different kinds of organizations. Or maybe you're trying to expand geographically and people don't know how to focus that, or they don't really think that through clearly. And so maybe they try to we'll sell everywhere. We'll sell over the whole planet. You can do that over the internet, right? And what that tends to do is it creates confusion and you get a very tepid response. And so what I encourage that you do is that you pick a couple of channels or a couple of geographies or a couple of new customer pools that you want to try to expand into. Identify one or two or three of them, ones that seem like a good fit for you, and really focus on trying to sell to those. Learn to those and learn to expand into those. Is it a shift in your communication? Is it a shift in the kinds of services or products that they really want? Is there something maybe new that you could offer that you haven't offered before that this particular audience is looking for? You kind of explore with that and figure out what's a good fit. And then out of that, identify the one or two that really seem to work. And that's what I recommend that you do. And then you double down into those until you've really gained a good foothold in that space and you're not thinking about it as much. It's more second nature, and then you can add and expand to a new one. The sixth thing that you want to do is to set up a repeating revenue model. This is often referred to as a subscription model, but there's other ways to refer to it or to set it up as well. But here's the point of this is in your business, if you have people who are on kind of automatically buying your services, like every year their subscription renews, you're in a place now of having a reoccurring income that you can count on. That is a massive relief for business owners or leaders who are trying to scale, because you can reasonably predict your cash flows or your income, which allows you to gauge, can we hire new people? Can we make new capital improvements? Can we do different spends that will, maybe there'll be a delay in terms of how long we can expect to receive that money back or that investment back. But if you have reoccurring revenues, you can manage that risk a little bit more intelligently and more comfortably, which is very important. And so there's a lot of different ways to set these up. The classic ways are what we're all used to now on the internet, where you sign up for a service and it wants you to do a subscription. And so you're paying monthly or annually, and it has your credit card number, and it just kind of keeps renewing. That's the most classic way. And maybe it's not an internet service. Maybe it's, you're part of the Socks of the Month Club, and you get a box of brand new socks every month. And you get your top 6 socks or whatever, bacon of the month, or any kind of service delivery or product delivery process like that. It becomes very, very useful to you because you can count on the sales being made. It's less effort. You made the sale once, but you keep making it again monthly or on an annual basis. Now, if you're in other industries, actually, interrupt myself, in the medical space, this is starting to show up in concierge medicine. What's called concierge medicine is people are able to pay monthly or annually, and they get a certain service, a certain suite of medical services for a set rate. It's very attractive, it's very popular, and it's often more affordable than what people think if you take a look at it. And what it allows is for the medical providers, it allows them to have that regular set of service. And it actually, for many medical providers, it allows them to make a very good income seeing a much smaller patient panel, and they can just focus on those folks a lot more easily and get to know them a little bit better. And so there's a lot of benefits that can be there both ways. In some industries, it's a little harder. A lot of my clients are in construction, and unless you're selling some kind of a maintenance plan or service plan, which you can do, and in certain industries that works really, really well, and you should sell something like that. In other industries, there's a concept just called backlog, and basically you're pre-selling services for a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out. It's not quite the same thing as a subscription model, but it does give you that ability to forecast what next year's revenues will probably be, and then that gives you some confidence or certainty for planning. The main thing that you want to do in this is to try to figure out, how do you secure ongoing sales into the future without having to make each individual sale on your own, or your team making it on their own. Not only does this help you manage your finances, manage cash flows, and project out your financial capacity into the future, if you're ever thinking about selling your business, that one capacity on its own, that ability to have subscription sales or repeat contracted sales, is a massive, massive value builder for your business. Buyers like to see that because it does the same thing for them that it does for you. It gives them confidence that these sales will keep coming in. One caveat to this. Repeat business is not the same thing. So just because customers love you and they keep coming back is not the same thing as having secured them in a subscription or some kind of a contracted relationship. And so what you want to try to do is to flip that, where even though they're repeat, and that's great, not to minimize that at all, but what you want to try to do, if possible, if you know somebody's coming to you every single Friday, they buy the same thing from you, and it happens every Friday, they come in, it's a good thing to think about, like, okay, is there a way that I can sell? Like, hey, if you buy this package deal, you can get 15% off each time you come in on Friday, or we'll just send it to you, or something like that. And it reduces the friction, and it increases the value of your business, and it also gives you predictability financially. So those are the six things that you want to do that will help you scale. And if you work your way through them, your business will almost certainly naturally grow, assuming you're running things right internally. And so this has to do with building the right team, putting the right people on the right seats on the bus, establishing your core systems, operationalizing the culture of your company, productizing what you do best. You don't have to have everything labeled this way, but you want to have a few things that are set up that people can just buy that product or that service or that offering. They remember it. The fifth thing is find a new channel or a new market or a new audience or a new customer base that you can expand into. And then the sixth thing is to secure repeatable revenue models, often through some kind of a subscription. If you do those 6 things, you'll grow. Now, there's 3 things that I want to introduce to you that will really create friction and make it harder for you to scale. The first is don't scale chaos. And this happens, unfortunately, a lot. People try to scale a chaotic system. They maybe are able to enter into a new contract, and this is when you start selling before you've built your foundation. And I see this all the time. Somebody's been running along, they've got a $20 million company, and all of a sudden they land this large contract or they engage in a new way, a new sales process, and it just starts flooding them with new sales, which sounds exciting and sounds great. But they haven't really built the team, they don't have the playbook in place, and things just start to fall apart. Where there was little tensions between, Department A and Department B, and people weren't talking that well, now all of a sudden they don't talk at all, and they're fighting, and customers aren't being served, and services aren't being delivered, and your reputation goes down, and all of a sudden you're getting poor reviews, and people are not wanting to buy from you anymore. And you see this all the time. You'll see this with companies that will grow, and they'll have a high watermark year, and then all of a sudden they collapse back down. And what's happening in that, it's a very, very common scenario. So if you've experienced that, almost certainly it's because you didn't have one of these foundational elements that I've described in place, oftentimes around people or around processes. And so you want to have that. Don't scale chaos. Scale strength, scalability, and where you see chaos, where you see looseness in the system, just imagine that if you put more load or speed onto it, it's going to exaggerate wherever there's problems. So you want to identify those quickly and do what you can to fix those and improve those. The second thing that you want to do that will help prevent you slowing down or creating a bottleneck for growth is don't cling to what got you here. Marshall Goldsmith has a book that's called, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that saying or that quote is so important to remember. Many organizations got to where they're at because they did things a certain way. But to get to where they want to go, they're going to have to let go. And that may be something about how they're structured. It may be something that they really value about being informal. It might be a way of doing their running a department, running a warehouse, running how they supply things. There's just something about what they're doing that may have been effective, and there may have been a place for it, or it was just tolerable at a certain size, at a certain level. But if you want to move up, if you want to scale, make a big jump or make a number of big jumps, you just have to accept that there's going to be changes. One of the biggest places I see this show up is in businesses that were run by leaders that were very intuitive. Like they just get it, they understand business, but there's a ceiling to what they can just feel in their gut. There's a ceiling to the level of complexity that they can just manage internally. And one of the biggest challenges for them is they'll say, well, I didn't have these tight financial controls in place or really good financial systems, or we didn't have an inventory system in place, or we didn't have these things that feel corporate and bureaucratic. We didn't have these things in place, and we did fine. Why do we need that? And the reason is because oftentimes they've been running off of their gut, off of their internal sense of what works, and there's this, as I said, there's a ceiling to that, and they'll hit that limit, and you'll see them try to get beyond that and then get drawn back down. Try to get beyond it and then get drawn back down again. And if you've experienced that, it's because there's probably something that you're holding on to, an old way of doing things that got you to where you're at right now, but it's not going to help propel you forward. It went from functioning as an engine to get you here, now it's an anchor and it's holding you back. So you want to be able to think through carefully, how do we need to evolve and grow? And oftentimes the answer of that is structure and people, really, is what it often comes down to, along with the other things that I talked about with scaling. But structure and people and operationalizing your culture are really 3 of the most critical things that you need to be thinking about. The third thing, and this often happens, is you want to be careful not to build growth or build success around yourself. So as your company grows, you want to be actively building other people who can operate the company. And so if this growth is dependent on your ability to sell, on your ability to manage, on your ability to create, or whatever it is, and you are focusing primarily on growing your abilities and not growing your team's ability, then what you're doing is you're doubling down and investing deeply in a single point of failure. And you will become the bottleneck for growth. It happens all the time. It's very, very common. And it can be hard for leaders to what you want to do is shift your source of satisfaction and purpose away from I am the best at doing these things to I help build the best team. I'm helping enable the best folks when it comes to being able to sell, being able to build, being able to create, being able to deploy. My job is now enabling their success and their excellence in these spaces, not me being the one that does it all. And if you can make that shift, then scaling frequently happens just sort of naturally. And so that's something to pay a lot of attention to. I hope that helps. These really are the 6 things that you need to pay attention to, that if you want to scale and you want to grow, and 3 things that will hold you back if you don't pay attention to those. And so hopefully this works for you. If you found this useful, what helps me is if you like and subscribe to the channel.